Matthew Bell with Alzheimer'sProof.com, and today I want to discuss a little bit about diet. Now, I have in mind here a three-part sort of series that is going to get into ways in which you can minimize your risk for Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, as well as to promote brain health. So you might think of it as a three-part series in brain boosting. Now the first part of this is going to focus heavily on what's called the MIND diet, and you can see it behind me. I'll get to it in a minute. I'm going to just briefly touch on herbal supplements, the importance of water, the importance of exercise, but I'm going to get into these further in other videos because as I'm going through this material, I realize it's just too much to tackle in one sitting. In part one, I'm going to tackle the MIND diet. At least I'm going to give you an overview. In part two, I'm going to deal with mental exercises. This is going to be things like crossword puzzles, brain teasers, and that kind of thing that are going to help to keep your mind agile. And then in the third part, I'm actually going to get into mnemonics, other kinds of tricks and tips for just helping to augment and to give support to your memory. All right, so let's dive in. So in the first place, MIND diet. It's kind of an odd acronym, but MIND diet essentially stands for Mediterranean dash. That's the M part, Mediterranean dash, that is hyphen dash, and then intervention for neurodegenerative delay. So in other words, this diet is supposed to help to delay neurodegeneration. That's the N and the D, and then M literally stands for Mediterranean dash, and we're going to look at that in just a second and tell you exactly kind of what that means. But it's an intervention, so it's a dietary intervention. That is to say, it's a way of changing the way you eat in order to promote brain health. This was developed by a lady named Martha Morris, and she was operating out of Rush University Medical Center. What she did was to combine two diets that were already in use, the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, D-A-S-H. So Mediterranean diet, before I get into that, Martha Morris's diet is supposed to promote brain health and lower the risk of mental decline or Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. But it's based on two previous diets. The Mediterranean diet is one. Now the Mediterranean diet in the first place is the diet of those people who live around the Mediterranean Sea. And that sea, of course, geographically is located between Southern Europe and Northern Africa. So we're talking about southern France, we're talking about Italy, we're talking about Greece, that area. The Mediterranean diet in particular is made up of certain elements, like it's heavy in vegetables, fruits, nuts, proteins of a particular kind, healthy grains, and two very distinctive things. Number one is olive oil, which is native to that area, and secondly, wine in moderation. We'll put an asterisk on that. Now the second diet that the MIND diet draws from, beside the Mediterranean diet, is the DASH diet. D-A-S-H stands for Dietary Approaches to Stopping Hypertension. These acronyms, right? Hypertension, of course, is another name basically for high blood pressure. So it's for heart health. Interesting thing, the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. Now why has this become a thing? Well, because certain people who study sociology, epidemiology, have drawn correlations between people who have been on these diets, for example, living in the Mediterranean area, and lower incidences of Alzheimer's disease on the one hand, and secondly, lower incidences of heart disease, and thirdly, longer overall longevity. They live long, according to researchers. So what Martha Morris did was to look at the components of these diets and ask for each one whether there was evidence that these components were associated with promotion of mental health, with staving off degeneration and the like of this. So her recommendations for the MIND diet basically are an extension. Those elements of these two previous diets, the Mediterranean and the DASH diet, the elements of which tend best to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. So a couple of do's and don'ts. In general, the MIND diet is going to emphasize vegetables, especially cruciferous or green leafy vegetables. This is going to include things like broccoli, like cabbage, collard greens, mustard greens, kale, lettuce of certain varieties. Romaine lettuce is going to be favored to things like iceberg lettuce. Now, I should say, I have a detailed list of components that are arguably part of the MIND diet and you can get that on my website at alzheimersproof.com. I have an article on this. The link will be in the description down below. In addition, I am working on kind of a cheat sheet, if you will, that can give you a very quick impression of the kinds of things that you should be adding into your diet. And that also will be at alzheimersproof.com/MIND diet, D-I-E-T, mind diet. Second thing is going to be berries. Now, the Mediterranean diet had incorporated fruits in general, but the Alzheimer's diet, or mind diet, is focused specifically on berries because it was discovered that fruits in general don't correlate strongly with avoiding Alzheimer's disease, but berries do, especially blueberries rank at the very top of this list. But beside that, you'll find blackberries and strawberries and raspberries among some of the more common varieties, and then some a little bit more exotic, like goji berries or acai berries. Another component is going to be beans. Beans in the main are going to include things like kidney beans, pinto beans, but in other lists you might find lentils and navy beans and many others. Again, consult the fuller list at alzheimersproof.com. Nuts are going to be a part of this as well. Almonds rank at the top of this list. Sometimes people will put cashews. A stickler here might point out that cashews are technically a fruit, and in which point they might be classified as an extra here, but almonds and walnuts are going to rank at the top of the list for nuts. Also, whole grains, generous helpings of whole grains. This is going to include things like quinoa, whole wheat bread, brown rice. Some people include barley and rye. Fish, especially mackerel and salmon. Tuna sometimes shows up on the list, but with an asterisk. You've got to be careful about heavy metal content with certain forms of tuna. Again, for details, consult alzheimersproof.com. Poultry, or white meat, is going to be an important fixture of the diet. That's going to include things like chicken and turkey. And as a borrowing from the Mediterranean diet, another fixture of the mind diet is going to be olive oil and red wine in particular. Red wine contains a compound called resveratrol. I've talked about this in another video. Again, I'll link to it in the description if you want more information. But resveratrol is positively correlated with mental health, brain health, and even with mental health, brain health, and it even has certain indicators that it might be effective at treating certain things that surround Alzheimer's disease, like inflammation. Now, not all wines are going to be the same quality here. We're talking mostly about dry wines over sweet, and we're talking about mostly red wine over white. Of the red wines, though, there's going to be different sort of a pecking order here. For the details, once again, alzheimersproof.com, but just to give you a kind of a fix, some of the red wines are more commonly available, like Merlot or Cabernet Sauvignon, but also Malbec is going to be one of the ones that ranks fairly high. A number of don'ts on the mind diet. Don't eat red meat. Don't eat cheese and dairy. This is a departure from the mind diet compared to the DASH diet. The DASH diet did include low-fat and non-fat dairy, whereas the mind diet is more or less completely bereft of dairy. Butter should be eliminated or minimized. And of course, processed food, junk food, is supposed to be eliminated if possible and certainly minimized. And this is going to include fast food, fried foods, candies and sweets and pastries and all the kinds of stuff that in America, in any case, we're used to consuming in great amounts. Now let's talk about servings. Some of these servings are supposed to be part of your daily food regimen, and some can be mixed in with a little bit of less regularity. So, for example, daily, you should include healthy salads, vegetables, whole grains, and wine actually included on the daily list. And again, we're talking in moderation, so we're talking about 4 or 5 ounces, 6 ounces, something like this. The second part of it would be some of the things you should include weekly, but don't necessarily have to be eaten daily. Those are going to be things like the white meat, beans, fish, and berries. I'm fond of berries, but they are included in a secondary. Now, I should point out something, and that is that one of the critics, or some of the critics of the mind diet, or people who are a little bit cautious of it, will suggest that there aren't worked out recommendations, and this is quite true. So there are general rules of thumb, and there's kind of general hand-waving remarks about what classifications of food are best to include, but there aren't rigorous formulations for how much of these things you should eat, nor is there a robust body of recipes and things along the lines of that. So there's some lack of resources in terms of the Mind Diet in this video, hopefully, as well as the resources on alzheimersproof.com are going to try and go some distance into closing that gap for you, and for me too, frankly. Finally, nuts and seeds, and I didn't mention seeds earlier, but seeds would be things like chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. These can be incorporated into your diet as snacks. So instead of turning to the bag of potato chips or taco chips or nachos or whatever, the Mind Diet proponents are suggesting that you should go to more natural, heart and brain healthy foods like nuts and seeds. Now, one of the benefits of the Mind Diet is that since it draws from the DASH and Mediterranean diets, a secondary effect, besides lowering your risk supposedly for Alzheimer's and dementia, is that it's also going to improve heart health. It's supposed to reduce blood pressure. It's supposed to reduce blood sugar level, which can also positively support or guard against diabetes. And one of the interesting things about it is that even people who stick to it in only a moderate way are supposed to show a marked improvement. And so this means that even if you don't rigorously keep to it, and I'm not telling you you shouldn't try and have a rigorous regimen and try and scrupulously watch your diet, but even if you don't rise to that sort of high level, the diet is still supposed to have some benefit for you and for your brain and for your heart and other parts of your body. Now that's an overview. I hope, again, that you will find some of the resources at alzheimersproof.com. I have a general article, again, link in the description. I'm going to include the quick guide at alzheimersproof.com/mind diet. And that should get you started with some resources. Now, as an aside, I will say that I have another video, which again, I will put the link in the description, where I talk about some of the interesting supplements that you can add. One of those was resveratrol, which I spoke about earlier. But again, we're going to talk about herbs, and I decided I was not going to really speak at length about herbs in this video because there's just so much to say. But I will mention my top 5 that I think are worth mentioning for Alzheimer's and dementia, and that is ginkgo, Chinese magnolia vine, rosemary, saffron, and turmeric. And I'm not going to go into those in detail here except to just mention them, but I will say I have gone into those in another video. I've got plenty of written resources on the website, and I intend to make an entire video presentation just on my top 25 herbs or thereabouts. That's kind of where my list is at right now. Additionally, I will be talking about exercise. As I said, I'll be talking about clean water, sources of water, which is going to be extremely important. And then in 2 other installments, I will get into brain exercises. That will be installment number 2, as a matter of fact. And installment number 3 will be mnemonic devices. I hope that something that I've said was of interest to you or has sparked something, been informative. If so, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to check back in for additional content. I hope to have additional videos that expand upon some of the topics that I've talked about today, as well as going in, of course, to different topics. And I thank you so much for being with me today.